Fabrizio Romano has revealed that Xabi Alonso is out of the race for the Liverpool manager role next season, and so the position is still up for grabs, and I think that Ruben Amorim of Sporting Lisbon is the perfect man to take that role. Now, it does mean that the high-pressing, attacking 4-3-3 football that we see from Jurgen Klopp, or that we have seen for the past 7 years or so, is going to come to an end. Or does it? In this video, I'm going to discuss how Liverpool would set up under Amorim, and what sort of players would make the team, and what the tactics would be, and would it stand a chance in the Premier League. Now, whilst Amorim isn't really a fancy name that's known by everyone, he's certainly starting to make a reputation for himself as a very young manager coming up through the ranks in European football. He manages in Portugal at the moment for Sporting Lisbon, after previously managing for Braga, and he's doing a very good job there. And they currently sit top of the Portuguese league with, I believe, 68 out of a possible 78 points this season, and they've scored 75 goals, which is significantly more than their expected 61.4. And we know that he's been on the radar of a lot of teams. I think Chelsea have looked at him, Man United have shortlisted him. I'm sure teams like Juventus and PSG have certainly considered him as well. And as I said, he's only 39 years old, so he's actually got a hell of a future still to go. And he's already proven himself. He's younger than Xabi Alonso is, younger than Arteta, or the same age as than Arteta. And I think this man could definitely do a job at Liverpool. So Amorim is a fan of the 3-4-3 formation. Now, Chelsea fans will probably be reminiscing of that 2016-17 season under Antonio Conte, where they went and won the league with this formation. Spurs fans, maybe you don't have as fond memories, I apologise, but we've seen this formation have some success in the league already previously. Now, the Sporting Lisbon team lines up something a bit like this, as we can see. It's that 3-4-3 that I just said, and what I think Amorim loves about this is that it can defend in a 5-2-3 and really set up a low block, but it can also attack in this 3-2-4-1 that we see so often in the Premier League with the likes of Liverpool, Man City, and even at times someone like Tottenham doing something like this as well. So we know it can provide both strength in numbers in defence and attack. It does leave the midfield a little bit short, but I think Amorim's got the perfect way to overcome this, and we'll have a look at how they do that. So if we relate this to the Liverpool squad, I think the goalkeeping position is pretty easy. We know it's going to be Alisson that starts in goal. He is the best goalkeeper in the world, if not at least in the Premier League, and he's certainly still got a few more years left in him before they even need to start reconsidering the goalkeeper role. And he's played obviously for Benfica as well, and I just think that, you know, he's almost a staple. We don't really need to spend much time on the goalkeeper. Now, in transition, the two starting wingers for Lisbon often become number 10s, occupying the half spaces, and it means that the right wing back and left wing back can push forward almost into wide midfield roles or wide attacker roles, often hugging the touchline. And what this then means is that the two 10s and the midfield can perform a box midfield. And I think also what is so crucial in the first phase of this transition is how they get the ball to the midfield. And what they do is that they build up with the three centre-backs. So the three centre-backs have to be so composed on the ball and willing to drive forward to start the initial phase. And I think a crucial part of how Liverpool would do that is by their central centre-back. And I think you know who I'm going to say. It's going to be Virgil van Dijk. I mean, the guy is probably the best centre-back in the league at the moment. I know he's had his ups and downs, but he plays in a similar sort of role for the Netherlands, and I think he could definitely do a good job. We know he can do a good job. Not really any thinking required. But I think he's going to be the starting centre-back that's going to start in the middle, a bit like Coates does at Lisbon. That slightly older, not necessarily as quick, but a lot more intelligent, physical, stronger player that can just really command that back line. Now, also at Lisbon, Amorim starts often with a back three of Ignacio, Coates and Diomande. And I think I'm going to change a little bit. Now, we talk about player profiles and almost look who's the most like Diomande and who's the most like Ignacio that we can kind of take from that Liverpool squad and put in there. And there's a couple tweaks I think we need to make. Now, I think for me, Konate is certainly too good to not play. And so I think for me, his best position would be somewhere probably at right centre-back. He could play left centre-back, but for me, I think right centre-back is the best position. And if you look at who he reminds me of. I'd argue he's a bit more like Ignacio than he is of Diomande, but he's very quick, and I think this system suits him really well. And I also think when we look at who could play left centre-back, there's a few options. You've got like Joe Gomez. I don't know if Joel Matip is necessarily going to be the right profile they're looking for, and I compared Diomande to a player that has had a good run of form and managed to get his name in the team sheet so far this season is Quansah. And I don't think he's necessarily a bad option. But when you look at the stats of how Amorim uses Diomande at Lisbon, he makes a lot more tackles in the midfield third. So he basically means he likes to close the opposition down quickly, get out, press high, and really attack early on to try and counter press against the opposition. And Diomande averages, I believe I've got it here, Diomande averages 0.63 tackles per 90 in the midfield third, whereas Quansah only averages 0.14, and I think this is a stat that Amorim will probably not be very fond of. So I actually don't think Quansah is the right man for this team. And I don't really think Joe Gomez is either. And so what I actually think is best is, I think the best player that Liverpool could sign to fill in this gap is Ignacio. But I don't see that happening. And so because of that, I've had a look at another player that I think could do a similar job to both Diomande and Ignacio, depending on where he wants to play him. And that is another Frenchman, Jean-Claire Todibo of Nice. I think he's having a really good season, and I definitely think he's a profile that Liverpool have probably got shortlisted already, and I think he could fill in a back three really well. And when we look at his stats, when you compare it to Ignacio, he has very similar stats, and I think Amorim would love to have a player like this in his team at Liverpool. Now in the midfield, Lisbon line up with Hjulmand and Morita. Not really much to say here. Morita's more of a box-to-box, quite small, nimble, and I think the perfect replacement for him is McAllister. I don't really think that's a difficult one. I'm pretty sure that that's the option that he would go with. And Hjulmand being the more defensive midfielder, I think, whilst you could argue Gravenberch, I don't think Gravenberch is disciplined enough to play that role. And I think Endo is actually perfect for it. I think that defensive, disciplined midfielder would suit this team really well. And I think he'd be the perfect option. So I think that they should go with the double pivot of McAllister and Endo. I think you get a bit of the best of both with them too. You've got that attacking flair, and you've got a bit of defensive cover if you need it. So I think that they're the two pivots that would start in this team. Now, one player that will really benefit is this man right here, Trent AlexanderArnold. We know at Liverpool he gets criticised quite often for his lack of ability to defend. We know how good he is going forward, but dropping back he's not necessarily the best. And I actually want to compare Trent AlexanderArnold to how Pedro Porro played when he was at Sporting Lisbon. If we have a look at the stats and have a look at the crosses, we can see that Porro certainly had a lot more of an attacking input into the team than he did defensive, and I think that's very similar to Trent AlexanderArnold. It would take a lot of responsibility away from him, and I think we'd really be able to see him shine in this, I don't want to say in this more advanced position, because in defence he would still have to play as a right wing back, but I think just both mentally as well as tactically, it just takes a bit of pressure away from Trent, and I think we could just see him excel even more, or at least hit the same levels that he's hitting under Jurgen Klopp. Having said this, the other side of the pitch, now for the Sporting Lisbon, you see two very different profiles that can play as the left wing back or the left mid, whatever you want to call them. Mateus Reis, I believe is how you pronounce it, and then is it Nuno Santos? I think that's his name, or it's definitely Santos. I know that, I didn't check his first name. Reis is a lot more of a defensive-minded player, can play left-back, has been playing left wing-back, but could also play centre-back. Whereas Nunes is more of what I would call a left winger that's been dropped a bit deeper. And I don't really think that Liverpool have a profile quite like this. Now, obviously, you'd go with Robertson being the obvious choice because of his ability to push forward, but also drop deep. And I do think that he's certainly still got some years left in him, but I do also think that the left mid position is an area that they could strengthen in, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it's not an emergency situation. I do think Robertson should at least be given a chance in this tactic under Ruben Amorim. I think that he could still excel, and I'm almost intrigued to see how Robertson would play as left wing back in this kind of team. There'll be a lot more pressure on him contributing attacking wise, but I'm interested. I've put him in the team, but more out of curiosity, I think. But he is a profile that I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to replace as well. Now, the next one kind of picks itself. I think you know who I'm going to say here. Amorim uses either Trincao or Marcus Edwards as a right winger in the front three. And both of these players are left-footed, which is where this man is just obviously the pick. He's Marcus Edwards times 100. He's the best player in the world at times, at least the best player in the league at times, maybe up there with Haaland and De Bruyne, but we just know how good Salah is, and he would excel under this role. But I do think Salah would have to be open to taking some changes. We know at Liverpool at the moment he loves to stay wide, cut inside on that left foot, and get a lot of goals and assists. I think under Amorim we'd maybe have to see his goal tally drop down a little bit, because he's going to be so much more responsible for the build-up play in attack. And I think it would actually lead to the person that I'm going to put as striker, if you can't guess who I'm going to put, I think it would help him benefit a lot more as well. So, regardless of like it or not, Salah is the best player. He's going to start. And I do think that he suits the Amorim system very well. Just he himself would have to be willing, I think, to take a bit of a drop in numbers. But we'll see how this all kind of comes to fruition in a minute. But at left wing, I debated between Jota, Gakpo, Szoboszlai and Luis Diaz as to who was the best option. I kind of compared him to the likes of Pedro Goncalves and Paulinho at Sporting, more so Pedro Goncalves. And when we look at the stats, there's one that really stands out, and it's this man right here, Luis Diaz. We know he's played against Benfica when he was at Porto, and also, interesting fact, Luis Diaz's agent is the same as Amorim's, so I'm just saying, it's going to happen. And then up front, you could probably guess who I was going to say as well. It's Darwin Nunes. Probably again, quite obviously. Now, when you look at the profile that Lisbon start up front, it's Victor Gyökeres, and we know how good of a season he's having this year. And he's got this stocky, good on both feet, kind of really tall but target man kind of aesthetic to him, and he's really enjoyable to watch. And I don't think Nunes has the exact same qualities. I don't think he's a hold-up striker. He's also a bit more flary. Is that a word? I don't know. But we know he can play as a left wing, whereas Gyökeres is an out-and-out striker. But I think we could still see Amorim get the same out of Nunes as what he's done out of Gyökeres. But they're both the same height, and Nunes' numbers so far at Liverpool certainly haven't been embarrassing. Gyökeres has got 22 goals and 10 assists this season, which is quite simply incredible, especially when you consider that his expected goal involvement is only 21 and he's got 32. It's quite a big difference. But I don't think Nunes couldn't do this, and I do think that there is a way that he would suit the system. The only difference is that Lisbon are not afraid to play vertically. They will hit a long ball into the channel, and yes, Nunes can do that. Maybe just Nunes doesn't have that clinicality that we know Gyökeres has, but that's something that could come with time, and I'm not worried about this position really. So for me, Nunes, obvious starter. So now that we know what the Liverpool team is going to look like, how will they actually play? Building out from the back, when on the ball, Liverpool would be able to form a lot of triangles and a lot of pretty much numerical overload. Now I've set it up here, I've just used the Lisbon team as an example. Say that Liverpool are playing against a front four that are pressing, it could also be just a front three, something a bit like this, probably quite narrow. But what I like about this is that you can see here, there is triangles everywhere. If I could stop moving the people, that would be great. There is triangles all over the place. And if I get rid of this, you can see in this area here, Liverpool have a numerical advantage. Even if Santos did get involved, there's always a spare man, and that is what Amorim loves. building out from the back, find that spare man, and even if you're under pressure, there's always that option to play it back to the keeper or play it back to the centre back who's not marked. And I think that's a really crucial way of building out, especially in the Premier League where the pressing is so high and so intense. It just means that you've got that security in playing out with confidence, and I think that's something that this Liverpool team would definitely need while going through an entire transition going from Klopp to Amorim. They're going to need something that's going to help them build or keep confidence from Klopp, and I think this would definitely be a really good way to do that. And the other thing that I want to talk about is then how, let me get rid of these, is how they would then build up in attack. So as I said earlier, Salah would have to cope with being a bit more of a number 10. Now, whilst it lines up in a 3-4-3, these two actually, this being Diaz and Salah, kind of become number 10s, occupying maybe more like this, the half spaces, and then Robertson and Trent would be responsible for providing the width. And I talk about this all the time. Box midfield. I bloody love a box midfield. I don't know about you. It just gets me going. I just love one. It really excites me. Really does excite me. And again, it allows normally in the Premier League to get that extra man. And there's no reason why the likes of Trent or Robertson can't drop deep to create that numerical advantage again in the midfield if need be. And I think this is, again, where Amorim's tactics are so good, where it's really fluid. They're able to always have, even if it's Nunes dropping deep, someone available to create that extra pass that we see the likes of Pep always doing. And it's just a really exciting thing to watch. It's just really exciting, isn't it? Who doesn't love a bit of a box midfield and a numerical advantage? Now, when off the ball, Liverpool will probably end up looking in a shape a bit like this. More of a 5-2-3, and we see Amorim do it at Lisbon all the time. It's often more of a mid-block, and it's very narrow. And often the front three in the 5-2-3 will press against a centre-back, especially if they're playing against a 3-back formation. They'll man mark against the front three, and it really narrows down the passing options for the opposition. And what I do really like is that the wingers will make these curved runs almost like this or like this when they press. And what that means is that the easy pass for the opposition is into spaces here. This kind of space on both sides of the pitch, because the midfield is so narrow, because they've only got the double pivot. The midfield's really narrow, and so that's where the space is. But then they're often met with the likes of Trent or Robertson, and they're kind of trapped. And I think this is part of the game plan when defending. Trap the players into this area here, and they are not going to be able to actually create anything from it. You know, if the ball's here, unless they put in a deep cross where they're still going to have to defend against probably something like this in the box. If Robertson's pressing, a ball comes in like that, the opposition's probably not going to win a header, especially against the likes of Virgil van Dijk. Similar from the other side, Trent would push out, Robertson would tuck in, something like that. Just not likely to get anywhere, and it makes it really hard for the opposition to get into the zone 14, and that is where we know so many goals come from. Such a crucial area to defend, and being so compact, it just allows Liverpool to really condense the pitch just to the wide areas for the opposition. I think looking at Amorim as the next potential Liverpool manager, there are a few things that we have to consider. Would Salah be okay with probably having a different, more narrow role? The answer is probably yes. I mean, it's Mohamed Salah. He's still probably going to get the numbers that we normally see him get anyway, but it would mean that he wouldn't be hugging the touchline so often, and he would be pretty much a second striker, but I don't think he would struggle with that. And I think he'd actually potentially even thrive off of it. So I don't think that's too big of a worry. We also know that Amorim's only 39 years old, and whilst he's such a good option for a long term, we look at Arteta and Xabi Alonso. These are all managers who look like they've got a really great future, but has he got the experience? You look at Xabi Alonso, maybe the Bundesliga is just a bit more of a tougher league, and he's really doing well. And I'm not saying Amorim's not doing well in the Portuguese league, but he's not quite got that experience. They didn't do great in the Europa League this season, so maybe that just means Amorim needs a bit more time somewhere else or at a different club to really build up his CV. But I also think that he's probably a really good manager if you want to look for the future, certainly someone that's going to need a bit of time to embed his philosophy into the squad and get the signings in that he would like, but can't take away from the fact that he's a really great manager. And also, he's going to be taking on a massive job. You look at where Liverpool are in the league now, they currently sit top and they're a couple points clear. And if they win the league this season, that means that whoever gets the job next year is going to have a massive task on their hands. And Liverpool are in pole position to do it this year, especially since Man City and Arsenal drew the other day in the league. It really gave Liverpool a boost. And if you want to see how that game ended and the tactics behind it, make sure you check this video out. And I'll see you guys very soon with another video. What do you guys think? Is Amorim the perfect replacement, or do you still think they should try for Alonso? Let me know down below. Thank you for watching.